Well, hello and welcome to today's webcast, Building Hybrid Mobile Applications with Alpha Anywhere. I'm Dave McCormick, Vice President of Marketing for Alpha Software, and I'm pleased to introduce Bob Moore, our Vice President of Mobile Technology. At our last conference in Boston, Bob gave a talk at the very end about taking applications you've built in Alpha Anywhere and wrapping them in PhoneGap so you get the benefits of a native application, including access to the native device's hardware, like the camera and accelerometer, as well as the ability to publish your applications to the App Store, Android stores, and other distribution sites. While the techniques Bob showed were certainly practical, there were a lot of steps involved. Since then, Bob and the Alpha team have worked hard to make this process as easy as possible. And I think you're going to be impressed by what you see here today.
Okay, so this is going to be a live demonstration, so this should be kind of fun. So what we're doing here right now is we're looking at the Alpha Anywhere IDE, and we're within the Web Projects Control Panel. And something new you'll notice up here is the PhoneGap button. So I'm going to go ahead and just tap on that button right now, and you'll notice that it realizes that we've got there'd be a new project. The PhoneGap project doesn't exist at this point. So I'm going to really quickly just build a quick project. So I think I've already got my what I'm doing here is I'm going to enter in my credentials. These are for PhoneGap build. So I'm going to say I want to build an Android iOS app. I'm not going to pick anything else. I'm going to leave everything as a default, and we'll just say save and upload to PhoneGap build. So what we're going to do here is we're going to build a real basic PhoneGap app. It's not going to really do anything, but I wanted you to see how easy it was to actually just quickly build something and bring it up and have it appear up on PhoneGap build. So what we're looking at right now is our PhoneGap build application manager, and I can see all of the different apps that I have currently available up on PhoneGap build. And you'll notice this is the app we just created, and notice that we've got these builds pending for iOS and for Android. And every 15 seconds this thing will refresh until we get a completion status on the application. So right now I could click on this iOS build, and I'm going to get a QR code. Now, if I scan the QR code, and let me just bear with me a second, because I'm going to go ahead and bring up AirPlay so I can show you this. There we go. And so what we're going to do right now is we're going to scan in the code. Let me just move that out of the way. And so we're scanning in the code we just generated. There's the link. And we're going to install this on our phone. And somewhere out in here, we should say, yeah, here it is, installing. And now I'm going to go ahead and just run it. So that is like the most basic PhoneGap app you can build. It just says device ready, meaning that PhoneGap initialized and life is good. Of course, it doesn't do anything, but it was a quick demonstration of, well, how do I build something really fast? So you can see that. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn that off for a sec. We'll come back to it. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and delete that application because I don't really need it. And so I can easily interact with PhoneGap build and delete that app. Let's go over to the actual PhoneGap build site. Because this is where you initially need to set up an account. Now, you'll notice that I have multiple apps up here. So this is available at build.phonegap.com. And in my case, I've got my account is all set up, and I can have up to 25 apps available up here. So I have a paid account. It's $9.95 a month. And that gives you up to 25 apps that you can keep up here. Now you'll notice up here that you've also got a QR code that you can scan. So that's another way of doing it. So what we've done is we've tied into the PhoneGap Build API. So we're talking directly to the service and essentially displaying the same information that's available here right within Alpha Anywhere. So I'm going to go back to the PhoneGap app builder. I'm going to cancel on out of this. Now you'll notice in the web projects control panel, now there's a PhoneGap folder. So this represents our application right here. And if we come in here, this www folder has all of the information about our application. What I'm going to do is I'm not even going to need that anymore. I'm going to just blow it away. So I'll just delete it. And I could overwrite it, but I'm going to just delete it at this point. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to take a look at using an alpha UX component to build a PhoneGap application. So I've got one right here. Now this component is available in a PhoneGap folder that's in your alpha, wherever you install alpha anywhere. There's a PhoneGap folder in there, and this component is in there as one of the examples. There's more and more examples that will be coming. So you can see the full layout, exactly how it was built. Let's just take a quick look at it. So we'll go into fast preview. And so what we've got is all these buttons on this panel that invoke some sort of native functionality. Beep, vibrate, bring up a native alert, bring up a native confirmation box, native prompt, or turn on the flashlight, or scan in a URL, scan in a QR code. So it's going to bring up the scanner, scan in a QR code, and then it's going to submit the results of that to the iTunes search API, search for the book, and then show us information about the book in this panel here. So what we've got right here is just some placeholder text that will be replaced with information that's going to come back from the iTunes search. And the thing that's going to be neat about that is that the data that comes back is all in JSON format. So what we're using here is the new HTML templating in Alpha Anywhere, and you'll see that in operation. The other thing that's here is a help panel that just explains the application. This is always a nice thing to do. And in here is a button. So this button is going to go back to the Alpha website, but it could go to a, you know, in your own application, it could go to a page that's specific about your app. And this is going to bring up PhoneGap's in-app browser. So this will not go out to Safari. This will be right within the application. We won't lose state. It'll just bring it up within the app, and then it will drop it back down. So that's what the in-app browser does. Now, if I click on any of these buttons from within Live Preview, they're not going to work because we're not in a native application. We're not on a native device. It can't install PhoneGap within a web browser, which is essentially where we are right now. If we were to look at, well, how did we actually program some of this stuff? We'll go to this beep button, and we'll take a look at the click event. So in here, we'll look at notifications. We'll just edit this. So this is using Action JavaScript to fire up PhoneGap notifications. And in this case, the notification type is a beep. It's going to beep once. And so we generate all of the JavaScript that does that. And you can, if you're interested, you can come over here and look at the JavaScript and say, oh, okay, I see exactly what they're doing. And you know, here's where this navigator.notification.beep is calling. That's calling into PhoneGap right there. So that's how that was done. So right now I'm going to just close this guy out, and now we'll build an application using that component. So we're going to build a new project. I'm going to enter in my credentials again. I'm going to build for Android and iOS. The initial component here is going to be the component we just looked at. So PG example 1. And this URL for all AJAX callbacks, this is important if we're calling back to an alpha server. In this case, in this particular application, I'm not doing that. So in this application, I'm calling the Apple Tunes iTunes Search API. So I'm just calling out to essentially a web service. Later on, I'll show you, we'll bring up another component that will make callbacks to the alpha server, and I'll show you how to do that. Now, in this particular component, I am using some additional files. So I've got a background image. You might have noticed that. So I'm going to go ahead and select that background image here. We're going to include that. And next we've got generate image resource files. We'll go ahead and check that. So in this case, we want to generate the icon that's going to display on the user's phone. So here we can just pick, and we've supplied a bunch of, they're all alpha related icons, but you can see, you know, what an icon looks like and so on. If you go into this PhoneGap folder under your executables directory, app icons. Now in this case, you'll see a bunch of them because I generated them for all the different sizes. These are kind of all the sizes you need, but I'm just going to pick this one size, the 144 size, and what we're going to do is we'll automatically generate all the different icons that you need for the application. This saves you a day of work, just this one thing right here. Also, you can set up splash screens. So for the when the app first comes up, you can set up a splash screen to be anything you'd like. Let's go ahead and we'll pick something. I think I've got some stuff up here in my Dropbox. Let's go take a look. Just bear with me a sec. So I'm going to pick a portrait retina display. Let's say for the iPad, that's okay. Here you pretty much want to pick the larger size because we're going to scale. It's hard to scale stuff up. It's easy to scale stuff down. And I'm not going to worry about landscape because I'm going to show you this on the phone. So you can really only start your app in portrait mode anyway. Here you'll set up your application ID. This is uses a reverse domain convention. So here I'll change this from the default to alpha software, and then just whatever you want to call it, say my app. And we can leave all this stuff here, but you can change all that. You can also plug in the author, an email link, and so on. So here's where you're going to pick the PhoneGap version that you'd like to use. Now, PhoneGap Build, what we're supporting are PhoneGap versions from 3.0 and up because they made significant changes to PhoneGap, and from version 2 to version 3. It doesn't make sense to try to support all of the previous versions. So here I'm going to pick up 3.30. My target device is universal, meaning we're going to work with everything. I'm going to skip over a couple of these other things, and you see there's a million options here, and you can imagine if you've got to hand code up your configuration file, there's a lot to do and there's a lot to know. As I was building this, one of the things that came to light was how much disinformation is really out there on the web, all over the place. How do you include this plugin, or how do you do this, and how do you do that? And we've done all the research. We've figured it all out, and it's all built into this builder. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and in this particular instance, on an Android device, you have to enable whatever features you're going to be using. So in this case, we're going to end up using the camera, and we're going to end up using the notification features on the device. And now we need to start selecting, well, what plugins are going to be used by our application. So in PhoneGap now, everything you need, every function you need is really essentially a plugin. And they did this to keep the payload as small as possible. So here we're going to be using, I'm going to go ahead and enable camera. I know I'm using the device information. I'm also using the in-app browser. I'm also using notification, and I'm using vibration. And then I'm using a couple of third-party plugins, and you'll notice that we've got a bunch of third-party plugins that are available here. This list changes all the time, so we're updating it constantly. And if when you're building your app, if there's some third-party app plugin that you need that is not in here, just let us know. We can put it in there very easily. It's been built, the whole builder was built to easily just let us plug in almost anything. So we're going to use the barcode scanner here, and then we're going to go ahead and use the flashlight. So at this point, we've got our app pretty much all set to go. I'm just going to look at this again. Yeah, we're going to use our initial UX component is there. Yeah, we've specified, I think, everything that we need. And I'm going to go ahead and save and upload to PhoneGap build. So here it's generating the icons and it's generating the splash screens. It's done that, and then it's packaged up the whole application, and now it's uploading that app to PhoneGap build. PhoneGap build can slow down sometimes during the day at peak times, as you know, as a service. Sometimes it just slows down, so it's really dependent upon the load on their servers. That's all built at this point. Now it's going to go ahead and bring up the PhoneGap App Manager. It's retrieving all of our apps, all of the information about our apps. And now we can see the app that we just built is application with the ID of 833790. And you can see that the builds are pending. So we're going to refresh this screen every 15 seconds to until they're complete. Now you don't have to stay here and watch this thing if you don't want to. You can return to the app builder or close it out and come back later, and those apps are probably going to be built. So right now we've finished up that application. Well, let's go ahead and load it. So under iOS, there's our QR code. I'm going to go ahead and turn on AirPlay here. Go ahead and scan that in. Remove it. So I'm just using a third-party scanner here. They're readily available. I think this was a free one. And then I just click on the link, and now it's installing the app. And let's go ahead and fire that up. So the first thing that it did was brought up an alert, and this was an event that I tied to the PhoneGap on-device ready event, and it's just showing us some information about the platform. The reason it says PhoneGap 3.1 ready is I hard-coded that in. It's actually not 3.1, it's 3.3. But you can see the platform, the OS version, the device model. Oh, and you can't see the PhoneGap version underneath there. So that's correct. And at this point, I'll just toggle on the native beep, and hopefully you can hear it. So that's the native beep. Let's bring up a native alert. So this is a native control. It's a native alert. Now, and when I do the callback, so when I drop this thing down, it's going to do a callback, and I'll bring up a JavaScript alert, so you can see the difference. So this is a JavaScript alert. Notice you get the index.html in the title, which makes it, it gives it away as a web app like instantly, you know. Native confirmation. In this case, it's sensed that it's on an iOS device, and because it's on an iOS device, awarded me 100 shares of Apple. If we were on an Android device, it would have awarded me 100 shares of Google. So I actually would have been better off on an Android device today. But that's a native confirmation box, and this is a native prompt box. So in this case, you know, this is a native control. You can enter in information, and I'm going to say OK for anonymous user. And you'll notice up top it says the username is anonymous user. So you can use native controls to prompt for information or to notify the user of what's going on and so on. The flashlight I can't really show you, but it will just turn the flashlight on. But I can show you the scan and search. So let's go in there. And it brings up the camera. And we're going to go ahead and scan in a code, a QR code on a book I've got right here. Once it focuses, there we go. So did you notice how fast that works? So it scanned in the code. It did a submit to the iTunes search API. Got all the information. All the information came back in JSON format. Then I used the new templating that's in Alpha Anywhere, and so we built this whole. You know, all of this was done from the JSON data, and then if I click on this button, I can actually view. I'm in iTunes now, and I can order the book if I want to right here. So I'm interacting from our application directly on the phone with iTunes, and now of course if I want to go back to my app, I can just switch back to the application. And I think the important thing to notice here is that we didn't lose state at all. So we just came right back to right where we were in the application. And now I'll go back to this main screen. And I'm going to go ahead and I'll just scan in another book I have here so you can see this isn't blue smoke and mirrors. So let's see if we can get this one. And again, you can see how quick it was. And again, bringing up all the information, view it in the iTunes app, you know, all of the same stuff we just did. We'll come back in and go back. Now let's take a look at the help. So if I go to the help here, you can see we've got that button that goes to Alpha Software. I'm going to tap on that, and that's going to bring us in the in-app browser to the Alpha website. Notice when I hit done, it just drops down. I haven't lost state here. I didn't go out to mobile Safari. I'm right within my app, and I'm still interacting with my app. So everything you just saw here is all available. All the source code, everything about this is available right under the PhoneGap directory of where your executables are. And this is also all documented in the documentation that I think I just brought up. Let's see. Let me just go ahead and bring this guy down. Now this documentation I wrote for the original version of the PhoneGap build integration. That we used to use the command line interface, and we recently incorporated the PhoneGap build API, so we no longer need any of the PhoneGap command line stuff. So the document is constant. It's being updated right now. All of what you're seeing here is pretty new. And you'll see that within the documentation, you know, we talk about setting up the account and then building a quick app that just does a beep, but it gets you up and running pretty quickly. And then we go in and start documenting the app that you guys just saw. So I think that's in chapter 5. Yeah, so this is all documented there. Okay, let me go ahead and return back to the app builder here. Now, if for example, you wanted to um, use another component right now. So let's say you said, oh, I've got something else I want to use within my application. You can go ahead and do that without actually building a new PhoneGap project. If you come in here and you just pick another component, that's okay. And as long as you click on this generate PhoneGap asset files, it will overwrite the files that we created from the UX component. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about what's in this this PhoneGap folder. So let's go ahead and open that up. I don't know why it's doing that. I'm gonna I'm gonna kill it. I don't know what just happened there. Let's try that again. This time with feeling. Okay, so in this folder here, all of these files are generated by the builder itself. And what we've done is we've taken everything that makes up the component, and 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 we've turned that into an index HTML file along with all the JavaScript associated with it and all of the A5 images and the CSS that might be needed to build that app. So the application that you just saw is installed on the phone or the tablet. And in this case, it's not calling back to a server at all, not calling back to an alpha server at all. It's calling to a web service. So it's incredibly fast to load because it's not loading content from the web. It's all part of the application itself. So if we were to go in and look at this index HTML file, you're going to see a lot of stuff in here, and this is, this is your app. So we've generated all this code for you. It's all the JavaScript. It's everything, that you need to build that application. Now once you need, there are many times where you're going to build an application where you're going to say, okay, I want the initial app to load up and be on the phone, and you can populate it with data too, but make callbacks to refresh the data or make callbacks to post updates or whatever, and you can do that also. If you take a look in the JavaScript file, you can see the a5.js file. This is all of the JavaScript associated with that Alpha needs in order to run. It's a pretty good sized file, but remember, it's loaded up it's loaded up as the app, so it's all part of the application bundle. So there's no download time. So we try to load up all of the assets that you're going to need for your application right as part of the application install, and that makes everything really, really fast. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out right now, and we're going to go and bring up a different application. So let's go take a look at the demo mobile app. This is another app that is available. It was built as with numerous lessons to teach you how to build a mobile application. And what I did was I took lesson 16, which I think is the final lesson, and went ahead and just copied it. And then I went into the component itself, and let's just show you what this looks like first, so maybe you can remember it. Maybe some of you have played with it. So, here we see this application, and if you click on a row, it brings over information about that person, and in this case, we've got a photo associated with it, and so on. And it will allow you to take pictures and upload those to a database and so on. So what I did in here was I went to the photo button on the click event here, on the image upload, edit the action, and I switched it from, originally it was HTML5, and I switched it to Cordova. Now, there's some weird naming thing with Cordova and PhoneGap. So Cordova is the open source version of PhoneGap, and PhoneGap is the sort of Adobe version of it. I think we're going to just standardize on using the term PhoneGap because it is a little confusing. But here I pick Cordova, and you have to check this use PhoneGap build, and that's all you have to do. And now all of a sudden you're using the native functionality. You're going to use the native camera access in your application. That's all you have to do. So I go ahead and just get out of this one. And in this case, I didn't really make any changes here. But again, I'm going to go into PhoneGap here. And I do have an existing project that I already built. But the important thing to note is, so notice the initial UX component is our lesson 16 PhoneGap component, the one we just looked at. And this is the important thing, this URL for all your AJAX callbacks, because we're going to be making callbacks here. We're going to be updating data. We're going to be taking pictures and then storing those images within a database and so on. So we need to know, well, where do we communicate? Where do we send it? Now, right here, I've got the URL of my local machine. So I went into, I opened up a command prompt and just typed in ipconfig and picked up my IP address right here. So I'm using, that's my IP address of my Alpha server, and I use port 81. So you have to make sure you specify the port there. You can see the :81, and then I published to a test directory. So now this component would have to be published to that directory in order for us to make callbacks and to have them all work. So let's go ahead and we'll do a save and upload to PhoneGap build. Even though we didn't really make any changes, I'm just going to go ahead and do that so I can remember which application it really was in my whole list. So it's 833599. We're going to go ahead and bring back all of the apps, and we'll go ahead and take a look at this one. Let me just set up AirPlay so you can see my iPhone. And actually, I think this app is this one right here. Let me just see. Yeah, it is. But we can overwrite this. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll just scan in this barcode again, or this QR code. This is our app. Now, when you look at the app builder, you'll see that we're using slightly darker color on the different rows. So we sort of separate the rows, but the application itself, the app you're working on, comes in this darker gray. So you can always tell exactly what app you're working on. So this is going to be the QR code for this particular app. I'm going to go ahead and we'll scan that one in. And we'll load that up. And we'll probably see it updating. Yeah, it's updating that app that was pre-existing. But let's go ahead and bring that up. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and bring up, let's bring up this guy here. And let's go ahead and take a photo. So I'm going to tap on this menu area here, photo. And now we'll take a photo of this guy. We'll see who actually can recognize who that is. And we do the upload. Now we need to submit it. So now it's going to do a submit. And notice it generated the thumbnail. And we can see it within the app. So from here, what we've done is we've used the native functionality of the camera, brought in the image, uploaded the image to a server with a callback, and then updated the thumbnail in this particular application. And we've exposed the camera and the image upload through Action JavaScript, so you don't have much to do other than just wire it all together. It's pretty simple to do. Now, one of the other things I'd like to go over is I'd like to talk a little bit about debugging, because as you're building these applications, very often something goes wrong. It could be something very, very simple in JavaScript or whatever, and it's tough to debug these. A lot of times it's really hard to debug these apps. So let's talk a little bit about what works. I'm going to go ahead and we'll just get rid of this. Okay. So let me go back to here. We'll go ahead and close that out. One of the things that you can do for debugging is PhoneGap supports a local debug server called. It uses this technique using this winery server. And it's really not that effective. It's something that they offer, but you can't really see what's going on with your JavaScript. You can inspect the DOM, you can look at console logs and stuff like that, but you can't get into the nitty-gritty and see what's really going on. If something blows up on the JavaScript side. So, fortunately, you can actually use the debugger. If you're on a Mac, so if you're developing, like in my case, I'm using Parallels and I'm using a MacBook Pro. So on the MacBook Pro, I can use the Safari debugger. So I'm using the native Safari debugger to look into the PhoneGap web view, and to debug my JavaScript that way. If you're on an Android device, you can use the Chrome debugger, and that runs under Windows. But the important thing to note about that is that's only exposed through KitKat, which is 4.42, and the Nexus 7 supports that. So that's just an important consideration when you're developing on the Android side. You really want to get into a Nexus 7. I'd say minimum, because that way you can really see what's going on with your JavaScript. So let's take a look at actually doing some debugging here. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in my phone, and let me go ahead and we'll share this screen. And what we'll do is let me just verify what I've got. So I'm going to get rid of this stuff. I'm going to leave that one app running. So we've got an app running here, and within Safari, I'm going to go ahead and bring up my app. So let me just, I got to move some things around here. Let's get rid of that. Let's bring this guy over here, and let's bring this guy over here. There you go. So now we're looking at this application, and you notice, like, as I go over this stuff, you can see, oh, okay, I'm into the DOM. You can see exactly what's going on here. And on this console, I can see exactly what happens. So if a JavaScript routine fails or whatever, I'm going to see it right in here. I can see callbacks as they occur. I have a full interaction with everything. I can set debug points. I've got full control um, of the application on the device. And the Chrome developer tools do the exact same thing on Android as long as you're running KitKat 4.4.2. So this is all new stuff, but it's really important to know how to do all of this within your app. So Dave, I think I've covered pretty much everything that I wanted to cover here
That's great.
today. I think we could go ahead and open this up for some questions.
Very good. If you haven't typed in your questions yet, go ahead and type them into the questions window. I don't think we're going to get them all answered. We already have a bunch, but we will send you emails with responses. So let's just begin at the beginning. And a couple of people did actually ask about this, and they said, "What the heck is AirPlay?"
What's AirPlay
Yeah, what's
is
AirPlay?
with oh, sorry. um, AirPlay is an I guess you'd call it a service under iOS that allows me to broadcast the screen to an AirPlay server. So this is an Apple technology that works with you. So on my computer, I have an AirPlay server, and it responds to the AirPlay client that's on my phone. So the AirPlay client just comes with iOS, and then the server itself. In my case, I think I bought it for like 15 bucks or something through Apple's App Store. This will also work with Apple's Apple TV, so I can broadcast whatever is on my phone or my tablet to a TV that's hooked up to Apple TV.
It's great. Someone else asked, and there were quite a few people saying, "All right, but how come my copy of Alpha Anywhere doesn't contain that PhoneGap button? What do they need to do in order to get hold of this version?"
This is in the pre-release builds right now, and there'll be an update coming very soon that will have it in the official release. But currently, it's in the pre-release builds.
hmm And the pre-release you can get to through the help menu, I believe, in Alpha. If you go for check for
Let's
updates and
see.
then pre-release. So I know some people probably want to get started
I never
already.
do it this way, but
Okay.
so where would I do that? Oh yeah, so I could news and updates, download
I think it might be
patches.
under
Gee,
there. You know what? Never mind. We'll send you out the we'll send you guys out the link if you want to get started, or you could just wait and Alpha Anywhere will tell you when a new version is available. We're also probably going to send a mailing on it because there's going to be quite a few other cool features available as well. Um, the next question is about the PhoneGap documentation that you have created. I see that it said, "Can we get the download link off for that?" The answer is absolutely. We sure can.
that's all
Um,
actually right here, Dave.
oh yeah, if you could show where it is,
So
that'd be
if
super.
you, I'm sorry, I should have covered that.
Huh?
That's when you open up the app builder. There are two buttons here. One will bring it up within Alpha, and the other brings it up in a browser. So you can just click on that, and it just downloads it and brings it up.
Great,
It's a PDF file, so you can print it out if you want. And
excellent.
like I said, it's being updated constantly.
Someone else had mentioned, and this is just sort of a comment, but we'll make sure we pass it along, that it'd be nice if you could put in new phones and tablets into the simulator so that when you were looking at it in preview mode, it was there. We had talked about adding new ones, but if we could let people do it, that would be pretty cool. Another sort of quick question is just sort of does Alpha Anywhere have a preference for iOS devices over Android?
I think that originally we probably did because the performance was so much better under iOS than it was for Android. But that is changing. Uh, and the problem with Android, and I've said this problem more than once, is Android's free, and Android anybody can use it. And so what happens is these manufacturers get their hands on it and they modify it. So when you don't even know what browser's really running in it, that's been a real problem because you get totally different behavior on a Samsung device than you're going to get on a Nexus device, you know. And I think it's starting to stabilize now because the guys at Google kind of figured out that they were shooting themselves in the foot here, and they needed to bring it in and control it a little bit more. So we're seeing really good performance now, and certainly with this new KitKat build on the Nexus device, it's awesome. But you know, there's been a lot of releases of Android, and there's been a lot of changes to different browsers, and you know, you can go on one device, it'll run one way in one browser and it will run differently in the other. So it's just because of the fact that Apple controls the whole environment that we end up with such a stable and really it runs incredibly well, whereas on Android, you know, it's just been kind of an open playing field.
Right. But that's been changing so far, from what you've been describing in terms of support for the Android devices from Alpha Anywhere.
The well, I mean, remember what Alpha's doing is we're sticking to standards here, so we're building, you know, we're building HTML5 stuff, and the browser, but the browser has to support it. And if there's something funky going on with the way they're handling, let's say, you know, 3D transforms or something in their CSS, then we're going to show it, you know, because
Yeah.
you know, we use all of the functionality that's available, and we expect that the browser on the device is going to be compliant. And in some cases, it just isn't. And yes, we're seeing much better performance now. On I'll tell you that the Nexus 7 is wonderful. I really like it.
Great. So, a more technical question here. This one is from Clarence, and he said that he wanted to get the MAC address for the tablet that's trying to access his database as part of a security framework system. Could he use PhoneGap to do that, or is there a better way?
No, I don't think that's available. No.
Okay, not one of those things that PhoneGap can do. All right.
It can generate a. They used to be able to actually get the ID of the device, but that's no longer allowed. So you
Uh-huh.
can get a UUID, but it's an application ID, and if the guy deletes the app, reinstalls it, he's going to get a different ID.
Okay. Well, that's good to know, though. Um, another question about documentation is whether or not the documentation that you've created for PhoneGap will be added to the wiki. The answer is if it's not there yet, it will be there. We will make sure that it makes it up so that the wiki contains
There'll be a
everything.
link there. I think there'll be a link to it, Dave,
Yep.
because this was done in sort of a non-HTML format.
Hmm.
I used iBooks Author to write it,
Neat.
so that you could. The goal is to have it available as a book that you can just pull down to your, um, you know, you can pull down as an app essentially, as a iBook on your iPad or your iPhone or whatever.
Okay, great. Um, let me take a look. Oh, do you have any advice for putting your applications on Google Play or iTunes?
Um, Well, I mean, iTunes is trickier certainly than Google Play. So you really got to kind of focus on the iTunes side of things.
Okay.
And what you have to do is you got to make sure that you provide a really excellent user experience. That's what Apple really cares about. They don't want. So, for example, let's say your application relies on callbacks to a server. Make sure that you've got handlers in there, so if you're not online, that you know something good happens. Something, but you don't want something bad to happen. You know, and in general, that's just the right way to do it. You know, so I think that the real key is to provide a really excellent user experience, and I think we're providing you the tools to be able to do that. And you know, all this stuff is new. All of this the PhoneGap stuff you just saw is all brand new, and we're going to be doing more and more and more to handle stuff like disconnected. What happens when you're disconnected? You know, does it does your app does your app know about it, and how does it react to it, and can we sync data and so on? So these are all things that we're working on right now, where we know all of the all of the tough parts of building a mobile app, and those are the things we're really addressing.
Great. Um, let's see, let me find another technical question here. Oh, yeah, here's one that was asked earlier from Russell, who was asking about splash screens and was wondering if it's a requirement that you build a splash screen for your application.
Um, I would say I would say yes. Now, a lot of times the splash screen can be nothing more than a screenshot of your app, as it launches. A lot of people do that. So, in fact, that's what Apple's guidelines are. They don't really say, oh, this shouldn't really be a splash screen. It should really be, say, a almost like a picture of your app, but maybe without the data controls on it or something like that. So, yeah, I would say it's part of the native experience.
Um, Now, here's a question, really good one here from Robert saying, now, if your PhoneGap application does database operations, where is that database located?
Well, if you're using Alpha's server, and you're using, let's say, SQL Server, it's the same thing as it would be with a web app. It's doing a callback to an Alpha server, and that Alpha server is communicating with, MySQL or SQL Server, or whatever server you're using for that data.
Okay, wonderful. Actually, Russell has a clarification here, so I think I got his question wrong, which you said that when you added a splash screen, you didn't choose the splash screen plugin, and he was just wondering about that. Is that a requirement that we just overlooked, or is that not a requirement for a splash screen?
The splash, it's not required.
It's not required. Okay, thank you.
No.
We had a question earlier about generating QR codes, although I presume that was answered by now when you're, it looked like there were two ways to do that, if I got that right. One was by logging into your account at PhoneGap, where they have QR codes there, and the other was when you hit the, what is it, manage my
Yeah, just
applications, or
when
when
you
you build
manage
it.
the apps,
Hmm.
right. Yeah, we're generating those QR codes based on callbacks to the service. That's where we generate those things. Yes.
Great. And a more sort of basic question from Yigal, who is asking, basically, how do you share your applications for public use? Um, is there more than one way to do that? Is it only the app stores, or is there something else you can do?
Yeah. Well, there's and I'll talk about iOS devices right now, because it's on Android. You could share that QR code with as many people as you wanted. Um, on iOS, they limit you to up to 100 devices for developers. So you could actually have up to 100 people testing your app, if you will. Okay, and you have to provision their devices, and you do that. That's typically done through Xcode, or actually you can go to developer.apple.com and do it. That's where you set up. Okay, so these are all the devices that can actually access, this particular application. Um, so that's for like testing. But for deploying, what you would want to do is publish the application either to Apple's App Store, or they have enterprise app stores. So you can become an enterprise app developer. I think it's $2.99 a year for that account.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. So you basically have a collection of your own applications that are only available to people you invite to the store. Is that correct? Is that
Yeah,
how
and
that
that's
works? Yeah.
really typical. You get into a larger company, they typically are going to have their own enterprise app store, and people are going to install from that. They're not going up to iTunes to install apps.
Okay, so here is a PhoneGap side question coming from JP, who asked whether or not you had the option of accessing the phone's SMS or MMS capabilities.
Oh, sure, there are plugins for that, and they interact, with numerous services. Yes,
Great, very useful.
yeah. There was one other
Um,
thing, Dave, that just comes to mind that I didn't mention and I need to mention it.
okay.
Okay, so let me just do that quickly. Um, One of the things that PhoneGap supports, let me go ahead and get out of this and go to the PhoneGap website, um, is this concept of hydration. So here I just clicked on the app and I'm going to go into my settings tab and um, let's see. Yes, this button right here, enable hydration. This is kind of cool. If you enable hydration, what you do is you don't have to continuously scan in that QR code to get the latest update of your app. It will, when you click on the icon, or whoever's testing it clicks on the icon, it will say, "Oh, there's a new version. Do you want to upload? Do you want to load it?" And it just loads it, so you don't have to keep, distributing QR codes and scanning in the QR code. However, it doesn't work all the time. So it's kind of a beta. It's in beta right now, and so some of the callbacks I've had problems with on some devices. So it might work on one Android device and not another. So I didn't build it into the builder because of that, but it's a really neat feature to know about. Also, for debugging, this enable debugging, you don't need to turn that on to use the debuggers if you're going to tether the app to to a Mac, or you're going to use the Chrome developer tools for debugging. You don't need to turn this on. This is for that winery debugger that I was talking about, and that is explained in the documentation.
Great. Um, and someone actually did ask a question about that, which was, can you notify users when a newer version is available? So it sounds like you haven't enabled that 'cause it isn't working perfectly well for everything. But is there another way to notify people if there's a new version?
Well, that's the easiest way. Other than that, you would just have to, email your
Yeah.
testers. I
Mhm.
mean, we're talking about testing apps. We're not talking about deploying, because if you deploy to the App Store, it'll just push the update down.
Right. Once it's in the store, then it just knows. So, yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
you can push your updates
Yeah.
up there. Yeah.
And theoretically, you could just build the functionality into your application, perhaps have it, poll a server and say, what version am I in? Am I the right version? And let people know that it's a
Yeah, that's true. You
possibility.
can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me see what else is here. Oh, yes, a very important question here from Jay Talbot. Usually I don't use last names, but I decided to use it this time. He asked if that was a member of the band Pink Floyd that you were showing earlier on.
Oh, yes, but the question is which one?
Which one? I don't know. Well, he didn't get it right then, I'm afraid. So, yeah. Um,
Right band, though.
okay. Yeah, there were a few more comments and things which we will take offline now that it's becoming 2 o'clock. So anyway, I want to thank everyone very much for attending. Again, this session was recorded and it will be posted in a day or so to alphasoftware.com/events. Should you have any other questions about this topic, please send an email to guides, that's GUIDES, at alphasoftware.com. I'm Dave McCormick from Alpha Software, and on behalf of Bob Moore and the rest of the Alpha team, I want to thank you for attending, and I hope to see you at a future Alpha webinar. Take care. Bye bye.